I was thinking recently about a couple of sci-fi TV series that developed a cult following and that were largely considered to have been cancelled before their time. I've talked about both of these shows in the past, one of them being Joss Whedon's Firefly and the other being Stargate Universe, two series that were on the air several years before wokeness took hold of Hollywood. Firefly aired in 2002 and would culminate in a final feature film in 2005 called Serenity, and Stargate Universe ran for 2 seasons from 2009 to 2011. Universe would represent a major departure in tone and cinematography when compared to other Stargate series, and was often compared to Battlestar Galactica. Nevertheless, I really liked Universe, and found it to be the most believable and human of the Stargate shows. What made Universe's cancellation so egregious is the fact that it ended on a major cliffhanger. Over the years, fan communities have hoped that these series would return. As the years went on, following the cancellation of these shows, it became apparent that they weren't ever going to return, as too much time has now passed, with actors having very noticeably aged. It wouldn't be possible to resurrect the shows without some very elaborate explanations. Suffice to say, these series had their moment, and although they were cut short, they will always be remembered for being good series, or series that got the axe right when they were at the height of their creative quality. There's something to be said for the legacy of a prematurely cancelled series, because it means that it never stayed on the air for too long. It never declined in quality. It never went downhill and became a shadow of its former self. It will always be remembered for being at its best, or potentially being canned right before it was about to achieve even better things. Anyway, we're going to continue on this subject right after this. Before we go very much further, it's time now for a word from our partner for this video, NordVPN, a virtual private network that will keep you secure and safe online. Your activity and personal information on the internet these days is becoming increasingly more visible to others, and for that reason, you need to take steps to protect your data and privacy. NordVPN provides you with next-generation security features that allows you to do just that. It provides advanced protection against cyber attacks, malware, and trackers, and lets you block intrusive ads so that you are in full control of your web browsing experience. In addition to that, you can protect all of your devices on a single subscription. Nord works on Mac, PC, Linux, iOS, Android, and even your Wi-Fi router. Some VPNs really slow down your connection, but not Nord. Whatever you're doing, whether it's watching videos, streaming music, doing video calls, or playing video games, Nord's 5,200 plus super fast servers and groundbreaking Nord Links protocol mean that there's no bandwidth limits to worry about, just a robust, secure, and really fast connection. And their no logs policy means that there's no record of your web browsing history for third parties to see. You can hide your IP address with just a few clicks and have peace of mind while online, and in addition, Nord offers dedicated technical and customer support with a knowledgeable and friendly staff. Use my link in the description box and download Nord today. And if you make use of the promo code ComputingForever, you'll get 1 month for free when buying the 2-year plan. Okay, so welcome back. But I have to say, as the years go on, the fact that a really good show is cancelled too soon only further adds to its legacy and cultural impact. If the show had stayed on the air and continued for years, it might have been remembered as just another sci-fi show and grown tired, mundane, and forgettable as time passed. We might want to believe that our favourite short-lived series would have continued to be awesome for years to come, but this is of course unrealistic. In reality, any series that runs too long inevitably passes its sell-by date, like The X-Files or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Game of Thrones in their final seasons. Of course, the same fate can befall a popular film franchise. We saw that with the truly awful Terminator sequels. Terminator 3, Salvation, and especially Genesis and Dark Fate were a grave disservice to the legacy of the first 2 films, adding nothing to the franchise, only undermining it, and proving that Hollywood simply doesn't know when to call it a day when it comes to some stories. That film series should have ended after the second film. As for another popular film franchise, Thor Love and Thunder, a new Marvel Cinematic Universe film, is currently hitting cinemas, and the reviews are predictably mixed, with the plot breakdown sounding very meh indeed. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was already in creative decline prior to 2019's Endgame. That same year, the truly abysmal Captain Marvel had been released after all. The MCU probably should have ended after Endgame. To make matters worse, the franchise, like most big properties these days, has succumbed to pandering to wokeness. Though the last two Spider-Man films were actually decent enough, the general trend since Endgame has been a decline in quality. Shang-Chi, Black Widow, The Eternals, they were terrible, and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was a mess. The various TV series from Falcon and the Winter Soldier to Loki and WandaVision were also very poor. For a franchise that was basically a hit machine for the first 10 years, these days, a quality MCU film or TV show is the exception rather than the rule. I think the one thing that all franchises that have passed their prime have in common is that their primary story arc has been told, and therefore their reason for existing is finished. It's over. There were lots of mysteries for Fox Mulder to try to figure out on the X-Files, but once the main alien invasion plot had been explained, no other major mysteries could really compare, and so the show had no real reason to return. And yet, return it did, unfortunately. Star Trek had produced hundreds of hours of television from the late 80s to the early 2000s, along with 10 feature films. There really was no reason to bring the franchise back in 2009, let alone reboot it, a giant reset for the franchise. Creatively, it felt like the golden goose had laid its last eggs, and with no real interesting stories left to tell, it had no reason for being. And yet, there's more Star Trek series on the air right now than ever before. And of course, they're all bland, derivative, uninteresting, and in some cases just downright awful, and lacking in the hopeful and optimistic vision of Gene Roddenberry. They don't feel very Star Trek. Star Wars as a franchise ended perfectly with the Return of the Jedi in 1983, but George Lucas went on to make those awful prequels, which admittedly are arguably better than the sequels that would follow. I think the story of Star Wars, its core message and philosophy, and the journey of the characters was fully explored and done and dusted after the third original film. There was no reason to resurrect the saga beyond financially cashing in on the glories and name recognition of the first trilogy. It seems, in Hollywood, commercial interests always come first over quality of artistic expression. When we look at the sorry state of most big franchises that have clearly gone on way too long, that should have been put out to pasture and permanently retired years ago, one has to be grateful that some of our favourite series got the axe prematurely. After all, it's preferable to go out on a high than fade away due to the failure to understand that you can have too much of a good thing.